As a young child, Hugh Ross had a vocabulary of only 3 words. His parents did the best they could to help him overcome this and the other challenges facing him. But it wasn't until later in life that this brilliant astronomer discovered that what he has in common with Einstein, Mozart, and other men of genius. It's a great pleasure to welcome to the...
When Dr. Hugh Ross was a young boy, he was fascinated with astronomy. Hugh read every physics book in the school library by the time he was 7. As a teen, Hugh was convinced the Big Bang Theory was the only explanation for the origin of life, until he picked up the Bible. Since then, Hugh and his wife Kathy have been sharing scientific evidence of a purpose-filled universe. Today, Hugh offers powerful reasons for pointing others to God. In their book, Always Be Ready.
Boy, it's a great delight to welcome back to the 700 Club Dr. Hugh Ross. Doctor, it's good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
I want to ask you a few questions that are not pertaining particularly to your book, but things that you've written and said. You have said something that's very intriguing, that there are a billion trillion stars the size of the sun in the universe. Is that correct?
Well, they're all different sizes.
They're different sizes.
There are 50 billion trillion stars in the universe.
50 billion trillion.
Yes.
Almost.
And we need every one of them.
We need... Well, you've also said that this little planet we're on, in the middle of all this tiny little galaxy in the middle of the spiral nebulae, that this is where God intended. Is the universe revolving around this little planet we're on?
It is. I mean, you literally need the universe to be exactly the mass that it is, exactly the size that it is, to get one planet on which you can have advanced life existing. The whole universe exists to make possible our planet and our existence today.
You really believe that? I mean, we're the center of everything?
Well, we're the center of everything in the sense that the universe must be exactly the way it is with just the precise physics to make possible the existence of humans on this little planet.
What would happen if it was some other, not quite the same size?
Well, if you make the universe very slightly smaller, then all you get is hydrogen and helium. Make it very slightly bigger, and all you get are elements heavier than iron. In both cases, you've got no carbon, no nitrogen, no oxygen, no possibility for life. And the stars are just the right distance apart to make possible a planet orbiting our sun in an orbit that's not going to get disturbed. Everything is just right. Matter of fact, I've written one book, Improbable Planet, making the point every component of the universe, every event of the universe, Earth and Earth's life, plays a critical role in making possible the existence of billions of human beings, where those billions can actually hear and understand the offer of redemption from the creator of the universe.
Unbelievable.
Everything counts.
Let me ask you about these space creatures. Is there any possibility of a spacecraft traveling from a distant planet and coming to Earth, or is that just fiction?
Well, it's fiction in the sense that it's not possible for beings like us to travel across interstellar space without being wiped out. You might be able to send a bacterium, but you're not going to be able to. And so, for example, there's a mission to send spacecraft to the nearest star. But we realize the spacecraft has got to be no bigger than 10 centimeters across, or it's going to get destroyed. So we're sending these little tiny spacecraft. And even then, we're looking at 20 to 30% of them being destroyed on the journey to the nearest star. That's just the nearest star.
Well, how long would that take?
They're talking about sending it at about 20% the velocity of light, which means it's going to take about 25 years one way.
Oh, 25, okay. You've written a book about how come you know God. What is it science has showed you that convinced you there is a God?
Well, I didn't know Christians until I was in my 20s, but it was my astronomy that persuaded me that there had to be a beginning to the universe. And I knew if there was a beginning, there had to be a beginner. And so part of my story is a 2-year search trying to find that beginner of the universe. And it's basically through a Gideon Bible that I got in a public school.
Really?
That brought me to faith in Christ, yes.
There had to be a beginner. Why did your inquiries say that?
Well, you know, when you look at the universe, you can see that it's expanding.
Yeah.
There's space-time theorems that tell us that it has a beginning, not just of matter and energy, but space and time itself, which implies there must be some kind of agent beyond the universe that created the universe. And so I began looking for that creator.
Well, again, why would he be concerned about this tiny little planet we're on?
Well, that's a good question, but when you look at the universe and the laws of physics, when you look at the characteristics of our galaxy, our sun, our planetary system, all of it shows amazing fine-tuning. For example, we now know every planet in our solar system must be exactly the way it is to make possible our existence on this planet. And so everywhere we look, we see this overwhelming evidence for fine-tuning design to make our existence possible. Somebody must care about us.
Well, in terms of the beginning, is the Big Bang I mean, was it intensely dense matter that suddenly exploded? Is that what the scientists now believe?
Well, they believe that the universe began as an infinitesimal volume, incredibly dense, incredibly hot, expanded for that, but expanded under highly fine-tuned conditions. If you change the expansion rate ever so slightly, like by less than 1 part in 10 to the 56, you don't get life. It's got to, so this expansion must be extremely fine-tuned.
10 to the 56?
Yeah, change it by as little as 1 part in 10 to the 56, and you don't get life existing in the universe.
So it couldn't have been spontaneous then. It had to be a creator.
There had to be a mind behind it to explain all this fine-tuning. And the fact is, everywhere we look, we see fine-tuning. At the largest size scales, all the way down to the smallest size scales, everywhere we look, we see this.
What about your confreres in the science community? Are they beginning to accept this? They almost have to, don't they?
Well, there are many believers in the scientific community. I mean, there's a myth out there that they're all unbelievers. They're not. About 45% believe in God and an afterlife. And at reasons to believe, we've had the opportunity of leading many of our fellow scientists to faith in Christ, including even one who is a Nobel laureate. We tell his story in the book, Always Be Ready.
Always be ready. Well, what are you telling people in this book?
Well, we're telling people to put into practice 1 Peter 3:15. Always be prepared, always be ready to give good reasons for the hope that you have in Jesus Christ, with gentleness, respect, and a clear conscience. And what I'm promising in this book is if you put that into practice, you'll see God doing amazing miracles to bring people to you that he is prepared in advance to hear and respond to your good reasons. And it's like, this is fun. You got to get involved.
Yeah. What about prayer? I mean, you know, as a scientist, how do you, I mean, God is everything, in everything. He permeates everything that we have. He's in us and we're in him. How does prayer work for a scientist?
Well, I argue that prayer is the most powerful tool that God has given us. And what is interesting is the Bible tells us be careful how you pray because it's such an extremely powerful tool. And so I encourage people, start praying. And often you don't see God doing amazing things because you're not praying specifically enough.
All right.
And so I actually tell a story and Always Be Ready of praying for my parents who were not believers at the time and realizing that God was wanting me to be more specific and trying to figure out exactly what he wanted to do in their life and why he wanted me to be patient, realizing he didn't just want to bring my parents to faith in Christ, he wanted to bring a lot of their friends to faith in Christ.
So what did you do?
Well, I began to realize that they needed to hear the gospel truth from someone in their age group. So I arranged for people in their age group, and they really enjoyed them. That was a big breakthrough. And then realizing, okay, finding out what their barriers were. For my mother, the big barrier was the problem of evil. And so I wound up sending her for Christmas one year a DVD of a message I'd given on television on the problem of evil. And my dad says she kept saying while she was watching it, why didn't Hugh tell us this years ago? His comment was, you wouldn't let him. And he says, the beautiful thing about that, she couldn't interrupt you.
I want to go back to your early childhood. You only had about three years. You were autistic, but turns out you have something else. Could you tell us what that is? That's something extra?
Well, I argue that people who are autistic, who have normal or above average intelligence, they have a special gift. And I encourage parents with autistic children, find out what that gift is, and you do it by exposing your child to advanced material. Now, my parents didn't do that for me. I did it on my own. I found out astronomy is something I really liked. So at age 7, I was reading 5 books a week on physics and astronomy. But I need to give credit to my grade 1 teacher. I had a grade 1 teacher only for 6 weeks. She knew I wasn't talking. She knew I couldn't make numbers or letters because I wasn't able to make a pencil do what I wanted it to do. But she held me after school and just asked me questions about 30 books on her desk and says, "You've read all these books." And I nodded my head and says, "I'm going to pass you into grade 2 even though you're failing all of your subjects." So I got into grade 2 and I was put in the last chair. That was the chair for the dumbest person in the class. So I was the class dummy. But I quickly figured out what that last chair meant and said, "I'm going to figure out how to hold a pencil." And so I would practice 1 to 2 hours after school every day trying to make letters and numbers with a pencil. And finally I was able to do that. And I forced myself to talk even though I knew it would get me into trouble. I did it anyway. And by the end of grade 2, I was in the first chair. And then when I was 34, my parents said, "Your grade 1 teacher wants to have tea with you." So we went over and had tea with her. And she said, "I had never had a student who went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class in 1 year. So I dedicated myself to following your career." And she had newspaper clippings of me on in her apartment wall. And she told me that she was a believer. She did not know I was a believer. But she said, "My prayer for you is that you use your science as a tool to bring people to faith in Christ." And that's exactly what has happened to me.
That's fantastic.
I had no idea she was praying for me. She didn't know I was a Christian. I didn't know she was a Christian.
What a miracle. That miracle is almost as good as hearing about the creation of the universe.
It is, indeed.
Dr. Hugh Ross, he's heading up the course we have at Regent University called Cosmology and the Origins of the Cosmos. And his book is called Always Be Ready. It's available where books are sold. Every time he talks and every book he's written is fascinating to me, and I'm just so thrilled he's here with us. God bless you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We leave you with